a lot of the fear and propaganda and anxiety is driven by economic inequality. The more unstable people's lives are, the more afraid they are, the less critical thinking you're doing. Because if you're afraid all the time, you don't have the energy to think critically. All your
Again, it's
energy
coming
is
to that playful state of mind. If you are in that playful state of mind, you have an open mind that's willing to look at things
yes,
and do the critical thinking.
yes,
It's not like something that's difficult. It comes automatically.
yeah. And if
Like
you
do
and if you look at
yeah, please come.
the collapse in history of most empires, they correlate with this kind of stuff. When economics is the problem, and I'm not just talking about like moving stuff around. When wealth is concentrated in the hands of the few and most people are just barely getting by, that's when these civilizations begin to fall apart and fragment and have civil wars and all kinds of stuff. And we are at the highest rate of inequality, so that the rich are richer and the poor are poorer than we ever have been since records began. And you have to understand, records began during the Great Depression. So we have a situation, and
Mm.
it's so hidden to most Americans that it's this bad because we have so many luxuries. We have cell phones and we have video games, and it feels like our lives are full of things, but none of those are often things that matter all that much because, while I love a good video game and I play video games, I much rather have the free time to go out and go on a hike or explore or be with my community or my family or whatever, right? But if you're working multiple jobs and you're exhausted all the time, you don't really have the freedom to do all that stuff. And
You're
like
not
like
even
you're saying,
aware of what you're losing.
right,
You're not even aware of what you're losing.
right,
Again, coming back to the book banning stuff, you can only have a difference in opinion if you get the information
mm-hmm,
first, if you're educated enough,
mm-hmm,
and if that's cut from its root, then where is the possibility of change that's being
yeah,
do we think we are going in that Orwellian direction of totalitarianism, because there's a huge amount of free flow of information and
mm-hmm,
it's rather easy because everybody is going more or less doing two jobs into a survival mode, and the media is controlled, as you say, and it's easier to play with the human psyche. you
yeah.
can you can hypnotize people in some level, right?
Yeah, and I think it's too simplistic to say we're simply going the Orwellian route because very obviously there's other processes going on. I mean, in Orwell's whole thing is not so much about the oppressive government; it's about the control of language and stories. That's the lesson of
Mm.
1984. It's when you control. I mean, it's in the text. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past, right? It's about the manipulative elements of language and storytelling and propaganda, right? So we do have that. That's absolutely going on. That's always been going on. As long as there's been any kind of I mean even just rumor and gossip is that, really, right? It's the control of information, it's the use of shame. I mean, we don't think about it, but gossip is social surveillance. Did you hear what that person
Mm.
did? We're shunning this person and we're putting pressure on them to behave in a different way. So humans have been doing that forever. But on the other side of it, we have kind of an element of Brave New World here, which, if you don't know, they use pleasure to control. So we have, how many distractions do we have in this world? Whether you're talking about distractions like video games or media or pornography or whatever, or drugs, all this stuff, right? So we have these processes of pleasure on this other side that help kind of blank us out, and then we have these limited narratives and controlling things that do this other thing. And then, of course, because there's always resistance. You have art that shatters and attacks all those things and fights back and is playful and all this other stuff. And so, while you can look at the world if you want, and you can easily take a nihilistic approach. You can say this world is screwed. We're past our prime as a species. We're never going to make it. You can do that. But then all you're doing is looking at the bad stuff. And the human story is the good and bad are simultaneously always happening. For every, terrible fascist leader, there are people who are willing to stand up and fight back against that fascist leader. I mean, we look at Nazi Germany, one of the most oppressive, regimes of the 20th century, right? But Hitler had constant assassination attempts on his life. People within his country were working in spy networks to try to down the Nazi government. I mean, it was going on. These oppressive systems, they cost too much energy. It takes so much effort to oppress people to that level that they can't last forever. There's not enough resources for it. And that's, what a protest is supposed to do, is to make the power structure hemorrhage its resources, spend a lot of money, have all these people on the street you're having to pay all the time, disrupt the economic system. And that's why so much of the human story is the story of resistance, and continues to be. You're seeing all these protests pop up all over the place for climate actions, for the Israel-Palestinian war, for all kinds of things. We're seeing all kinds of people having these events where they're saying, no, we're not putting up with it. Because people are not just passive beings. In these stories, 1984 and Brave New World, they are important cautionary tales, and we should not ignore them. But we should also remember how powerful collective human action can be, how wonderful resistance born out of organization and love and empathy for your fellow being, those are always existing too. They're there just as much.